So, Ricky, we will get started with the Fast Five. First question, what's your name?
Riki Kremers. I ranch in Lance Creek, Wyoming.
Oh,
Together with
Ricky.
my husband and my daughter, we run Kremers Ranch, Kremers Land and Livestock. It's about 8,000 acres in the eastern central part of Wyoming. Brush, short grass, pretty arid. We're in some not really tough country, but it is tougher than some other places. So
I think it's a tougher area than what I'm in. And what livestock species do you graze?
we run Angus-cross cattle, and then we have a horse herd, a pretty good sized horse herd that we raise. And then my daughter has some meat goats that she's raising and grazing as well. They don't run with the cows. They just kind of migrate around the house here in about 4 different pastures, but we do have goats.
Oh, yes. Those goats are always a fun addition.
Yes, they are. We're kidding right now, and range kidding at that. Like an Easter egg hunt every morning and every
Oh,
evening.
yes. Well, that's always fun when you can go out, when they can manage their own kids, have them, you can just go out and see them. It's like a Easter egg hunt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
And what year did you all start grazing livestock?
So this was my husband's family's ranch. And so they have been ranching on this property since 1973, I believe. And
Oh,
so a
yes.
little over 50 years, his family's been here. We bought the ranch from his family in 2008. No, 2007. And so then when we bought it, we were able to transition to our own style. My husband had already been kind of grazing his own way, doing his own thing. He was a May calver. His family was a February calver through the barn.
Oh,
So I mean,
yes.
he already had gone through a major transition. And so when we bought the place, we started looking at some rotational grazing options, some different things like that. But it was just everything always seemed so daunting and unfeasible because we are large pastures, we are rough country. We've got some draws that are, it's hard to keep permanent fence in, let alone string temporary fence or change temporary fence or anything like that. The deer and the antelope run through it. If you can find it, name it. We had the reason why it wouldn't work. I mean,
Oh,
we'd
yeah.
already explored all of those options. And so that we just kept kind of plugging along, looking at some different things though with our grazing techniques and changes over time. And so we've been refining our grazing ideas and everything since 2007, 2008.
Oh, yeah.
Well, 2008 is when I really started keeping records. So we'll just say really 2008.
Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, the podcast dedicated to sharing the stories of grass-based livestock producers and exploring regenerative practices that improve the land, animals, and our lives. I'm your host, Gal Hardage, and each week we'll dive into the journeys, challenges, and successes of producers like you, learning from their experiences and inspiring each other to grow and graze better. Whether you're a seasoned grazer or just getting started, this is the place for you. Calling all ranchers, if you're looking to optimize your grazing operation and boost your bottom line, Noble Research Institute can help. The Noble approach to education pairs their own in-field research with the expertise of ranch managers and advisors to find practical solutions to your unique challenges. Now is the time to register for one of their June in-person courses. Noble will be in Jefferson City for Noble Grazing Essentials, June 4th through 6th. In Kansas City for Noble Profitability Essentials, June 11th through 12th. And in Fredericksburg, Texas for Business of Grazing, June 24th through 26th. Noble Research Institute ensures that every insight they share has been tested in real-world conditions, giving you solutions that work, not just theories. Visit noble.org today to learn more about these courses or to register. For 10 seconds about the podcast and for the farmer, we can combine those today. So I was thinking about record keeping, and I've seen some things online. How are you keeping records? I made a poll in the grazing grass community and asked, what are you using to keep your grazing records, your livestock records? And I put paper and pencil and spreadsheets. But I left it open so you can add what you're using. I'd love to see what you're using to keep track of this, so next year you're able to look back and see how it's gone. Look forward to seeing your answers. And let's get back to Riki. Before 2008, you all were running a few cows. Did you grow up on a ranch as well?
I did. I grew up in a ranch in central Wyoming near KC. And so I wasn't unfamiliar with ag either. My family also was a February, March calver. And
Oh, yes.
that's been a transition. Set stock grazing is how I grew up. Set stock grazing is how Justin grew up. And so that just even changing the idea that we didn't have a summer range and a winter range that the cattle just stayed on nonstop for those seasons was quite a change for this place.
Oh, yeah. What was the catalyst for you all going, this February kidding, we were talking about goats a little bit ago, this February calving's not for us, and you all made the move to May. What was the catalyst for that?
The catalyst really was the fact that Justin was trying to, when he was, I think, just shortly out of college, so mid-90s.
Oh, yeah.
There wasn't room for him and his brother and his mom and dad all on this place with cattle. And so he went in search of leased pastures for himself. And the pastures that he was able to find were about 30 miles north of us, and 2-track roads were the best entrance to them. And so when you're got your cattle up there, it's not real accessible in February to check them. There's dang sure no facilities to check them. And so he swapped to May calving at that point just because he couldn't get to his cows. And he's never looked back since.
Yes. What did you all, when you all became able to go back to a February calving, was that ever a thought that crossed your mind, or at that point were you like, no, this is so much better?
Yeah, that thought it crosses our mind and we go, no, not
No.
going back. And actually, we have gone the other direction. When I was pregnant with my daughter, we were May calvers, 1st of May, and I don't know, she was born in July, so what was I, 7 months pregnant, and we had Mother's Day blizzards blow in right in the middle, you know. We just started calving, we're calving right along, and we looked at each other as we're trying to drag calves out of snow drifts and everything else to try to get them saved. And we're like, this ain't worth it. So we actually pushed back to June 1st calving now.
Oh, yes. And June 1st is working pretty good. That's probably beyond most of the inclement weather that you all might have.
It really is. I think in this last year, we decided we'd back up 4 or 5 days. So this year, our intended calving date was, I think, roughly May 27th. So we started calving actually on the 22nd with our early calf, or those short gestation cows. And as we were out through them the other day, yesterday, in fact, I would say we're pushing probably 60% done in this first 2-week window.
Oh, nice. Yeah. What kind of breeding period are you all using?
We use a 45-day breed up, but when we transition to our IMG style of grazing and stockmanship, it actually naturally synced our herd. And so it's crazy to watch. Like, breeding season is unreal. Like, the amount of cattle that get bred in that short amount of time, all natural service.
Oh, yes. We will have to talk about that more a little bit later. So 2008, you all had the opportunity to buy Justin's parents' place. You all bought it. What did the infrastructure look like?
By 2008, Justin, I think more closer to 2002, he had kind of come back to the family ranch a little bit and was leasing half of it. And so he then was able to, at his own expense, recognize that he needed water on the half that he was leasing. And so he put in, in 2005, I think close to 10 or 12 miles of 2-inch pipeline and water tanks. And then after we bought the place, so in '07, so in '08, I think it was, we went ahead and pipelined the other half of the place. So we have about 22 miles of pipeline that run off of 2 wells and is in every single pasture. And then our pasture size ranged from 70 to 1,100 acres. And so I think there's 21 or 22 pastures that we have that are in varying sizes, all permanent barbed wire fence. A lot of that fence from the 40s and 50s. We have some new fences, cross fences that we've put in, but very few.
Oh, yeah. With coming back and having that infrastructure in place, or that you all have in place now, did you ever try any electric fence, or were you just rotating them through those pastures?
We did try some electric fence stuff. Just like I say, from 2008 up to 2017, we were game to try a lot of different things and found that
Yeah.
a lot of different things didn't work for us. We're such a brittle area. We could never get the pasture size right. Like one area of the ground would be really kind of productive. And then you'd move to the next section and it's not as productive. You'd have the same size of paddock, and then you're not able to get equal grazing just because we're so uneven in our production and our pastures. Temporary fence, it became a nightmare for us. I have lots of temporary fence posts and lots of poly wire.
Oh, yes. But you're not using any of them now.
Nope, we've gotten away from all of it now.
Yeah. With your grazing management, are you feeding hay? Were you feeding hay in '08? Are you feeding any cake?
Let's see, in 2008, we were caking about 2 pounds a head a day. And that slowly tapered off till 2016 when we were feeding a half a pound every other day. And we finally looked at each other and said, why are we coming out here to feed a half a pound every other day? And so in 16, we quit cake everything. Hay is kind of on an as-needed basis. Up until 2020, we probably hadn't fed but maybe 25 round bales total in the previous 25 years. Like,
Oh, yes.
we don't feed hay in the winter. Now, in 2020, it was a little bit different, and we can get into that a little bit later, too, if you want, on what happened in that year. We had an early freeze, and so our grass it came up, and then it winter killed, basically, frost killed. And so we were stocked to the hilt because we knew we had this thing figured out. And then we ended up selling liquidating cattle off, like lease cattle we had in. We early outed leases and grazed insurance pastures just to get us into October, November. And then we had to go full feed hay. And that's the first time that Justin had ever had to feed full feed hay since the mid-90s.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, it never fails. Just when you think you have something figured out, Mother Nature says, oh, no, you don't.
Right? Yeah, we've been humbled quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't matter what it is, what species it is, even with my honeybees. It's like, when I think I've got this figured out, no, you don't.
Yep, here's just another lesson for you.
Right. With the discontinuing of feeding cake to your animals, I see a lot of feed trucks run up and down our roads all the time. How was that transition for you? Did you run into any wrecks doing that, or was it enough? Was it gradual enough, and you all had already decreased down to a half pound a day or so? Was it not any big deal?
It really wasn't a big deal. I don't know that we saw a big change in our cows at all. So it was actually just kind of a nice deal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, not having to go out there and feed them that little bit of feed every day. With your cows, I think earlier you mentioned Angus-cross. Have you always had Angus-cross?
Yeah. Yeah, we're primarily Black Angus. Sometimes we run a Hereford cross in there, so we do have some Baldies. And I think we've got a black-hided Red Angus bull that we've been running now for a couple of years too, but I still call it Angus.
Oh, yeah.
Red Angus guys are not going to be happy, but
No, they won't. But when you say a black-hided red Angus, that's a different animal than a black Angus to me. So
Yep, it is.
yeah. So what has happened to the type of cow you're running? Has that changed over the years?
Maybe a little. Our cattle are small framed. I mean, roly poly fat in July, coming off of the best summer feed and being dry. When we run them through the sale barn, the top end of them would maybe hit 1,200 pounds. Typically, they're
Oh,
going to
yes.
be 1050 to 1,100 pound cows.
Hmm.
And that's when they're fat.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So it's not those huge cows so many people think of when you think of Angus.
Right. No,
Of
they're
course, that
old school genetics.
yeah, that's an oxymoron when I say that too, because when growing up, we had a dairy and we always used Angus bulls on the heifers so we could have small calves. But by the time we got out, we had to stop that because the Angus calves were too big. We couldn't find bulls that would have those little calves for us. You have your multiple paddocks, you have your watering systems, and you mentioned you had 2-inch pipes and watering hose through in every pasture. Are you doing like a tire tank or a 10-foot tank out there? What's your watering point look like?
So we do have the big 12-foot tire pit tanks. We're pretty fortunate here in Lusk. That was, I believe, one of the first places that was cutting those tire tanks down.
Oh, yes.
And so, they were handy right here in our own backyard, 30 miles away from us. So we do have, boy, I bet we're probably up to 25 to 30 of those tire tanks scattered throughout.
And that makes it really nice. Did you all do anything for a base for for that watering area, or did you just pipe it and put the tire tank out there?
Really, we've just piped it in and put the tire tank there. Occasionally we have to haul some more dirt. And if it's,
Mhm.
wind
Yeah.
erosion is kind of a big factor on some of our tanks. Sometimes we get a little bit of water erosion from if it overflows or something, but typically it's the wind erosion that gets us. And like a lot of people gravel pack them, but we don't have the
Yeah.
access to a real handy gravel pit all the time without a lot of freight on it. And so we just kind of rely on our heavy soils to be able to hold it. One thing that we've noticed though is when we made our shift in our grazing, that the cattle don't just kind of lounge around the tanks anymore and beat that out. So a lot of times the only place about a cow's width away from the drinking tank is all that's beat out, and the rest of it's all grassed in. And so
Oh,
that's
yes.
actually kind of an unusual thing that we noticed when we changed our grazing techniques.
Yeah. And what I know you talked about during those early years, you all were looking and considering all different options. What brought you to IMG?
That was a journey in itself, I guess. So we tried the rotation thing and we had the rotation thing down pretty good. I mean, we'd made some pretty good improvements. Typically this area is 40 acres to the cow. And just through what we were doing in 2008, we actually were down to 34 acres to the cow. I mean, so we made some improvements,
Oh,
but
yeah.
we always just kind of felt like there's something else there. Like we're missing something. There's something that can be done to get this over the hump. Like we just kind of plateaued right there. And so this one day we were out, we'd looked at some badlands of ours and how we could improve those. And we had a bunch of, I don't know, it was like 10 or 12-year-old crested wheat hay, small bales that the strings had rotted on. And we're like,
Oh,
what?
yeah.
I don't know, let's go scatter that hay out over in these badlands and see what happens. And so we did. We went and scattered that hay out. And they were like, well, I think we need to bring the cows in here and let them finish scattering this hay for us. And so my daughter, I don't know, she must have been 6 or 8 at the time, just a little girl. And so the three of us are out there on horseback and we're holding these cattle in this basin and letting them just mill. And we'd hold them there for a couple
Oh,
hours.
yeah.
We did that 3 times, 3 days in a row. And every time they tried to come out, we just kick them back down in there and just force them, just kind of move around, walk paths, scatter all that hay. Well, I had taken pictures of it before and after and the video of it all happening and everything. And there was a Facebook group at the time that I was a part of, and I had just shared those videos out there for conversation piece. And Bob Kinford sees it. And he's like, wait a minute, you guys really need to try instinctive migratory grazing. He's like, it's going to fit your deal. I've been watching what you're doing. And we're like, okay, tell us a little more. And so he and I got to talking about it. Well, that was like in March when that all started. And in April, I had a horse fall and break my ankle. And so now I'm laid up and now I'm like a captive audience. And so Bob and I are
Oh, yeah.
conversing a lot more. And I'm like, okay, I think I got this figured out. And I go to Justin. I'm like, okay, this is what Bob says we have to do. So we'd go out and we'd work with our cows and I'd video it because I couldn't do anything else. And Bob would say, no, you just don't quite have it yet. And we're trying to herd him, trying to place him, trying to get him to graze, do all the stuff that he does. And it wasn't working. But then one day we were out must have been June or July. We were out riding and we come across a pasture and we'd worked with our cattle just enough that we could see some changes. And as we rode into this pasture, we came through this gate and it was like somebody had came through and mechanically mowed just a swath through this pasture. And the residual height on it was like 4 inches. Everything else untouched, like 8, 9 inches. And we're like, what in the world? Like, nobody would come through here with a swather or anything. And so,
yeah.
we're like, what's going on here? So then we got to paying attention and watching our cattle a little more. And we're like, oh, we're onto something here. Like, Bob kind of has this figured out. We don't know what it is yet, but he's got something figured out. And so finally I called him up and I said, you got to get up here. Like, we're getting there, but we're not there. You're right. We don't have this figured out. And so he came up then in August and showed us the techniques that it takes to reboot the herd. And we spent 5 days working with our cattle. And then after that, we haven't looked back because the changes have just been tremendous and they just keep coming. And the changes in the way our cattle behave, the way they graze, the way they interact, everything was like this huge shift. And it's enough of a shift that we went from being 34 acres to the cow to averaging 16 acres to the cow over the last 7 years. So that shift right there from 2008 doubled our stocking rate after we were already doing well, for the 40 acres per cow.
Right. You doubled it after it was already an improved stocking rate from where it had been.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So you all kind of, excuse the word, but played around with it for 3 or 4 months while communicating with Bob before Bob got up there to help you all get that, maybe you might say the last mile to figure that out.
That's a good way to term it because, we played with it and we kind of had an idea of what we were doing, but still didn't have the fine techniques. And come to find out, you really can't get the fine techniques until somebody physically shows you and you actually experience that. It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, I'd watched videos, I did everything, and it took the hands-on teaching of it to finally get it to click.
And Bob's got a website we'll put in our show notes, so if anyone's interested, they're able to go see what Bob's got more on it, as well as whatever you have, we'll put in our show notes.
Okay.
With doing that, first off, just tell our listeners what IMG is and what does it attempt to do?
So IMG stands for Instinctive Migratory Grazing. And what it attempts to do is mimic the natural herd behavior. It doesn't mimic it. It is the natural herd behavior of the cattle and the way that they move through an area, selecting the forages that they need at that time based on what's available and the maturity levels. I mean, it really is a selective grazing, which I know is not what everybody's after, but in essence, that's what the big herds did. They selectively chose the forage that they needed for the time of development or stage of life that they were in that fit their nutritional requirements. As we watch our yearlings, they graze different things than our pairs do or than our heavy cows do. It's crazy what the cattle will instinctively do. Now, to unlock that, it takes some stockmanship. And you've got the stockmanship piece appears to take the stress away from the cattle so that they want to stay together as a herd. They want to go back to those old instinctive ways and travel as a group. The density of it really depends on the forage quality and quantity that they are in at that particular time. Like in late June, mid to late June, our cattle will probably be the densest that they are. And then as the forage starts to decline, they start to spread out a little bit more. And then in the winter months when they're grazing, you'll see it. It's a path that they're on, and they're dang sure moving as a herd, but it's a pretty loose herd. But they're, the stuff they're grazing is not quality at all. But it still has ample nutrition to it for survival, basically.
Yeah, and we want to tell our listeners real quick, or I can't even talk. English is new to me. I want to tell listeners just real quick, it's our overgrazing section for today is IMG and talking about it. At Redmond, we know that you thrive when your animals do. That's why it's essential to fill the gaps in your herd's nutrition with the minerals that they need. Made by nature, our ancient mineral salt and conditioner clay are the catalyst in optimizing the nutrients your animals get from their forage. Unaltered and unrefined, our minerals have the natural balance and proportion that your animals prefer. This gives your herd the ability to naturally regulate their mineral consumption as they graze. Our minerals won't just help you improve the health of your animals, but will also help you naturally build soil fertility so you can grow more nutrient-dense pasture year after year. Nourish your animals, your soil, and your life with Redmond. Learn more at redmondagriculture.com. But it's a deeper dive in that we do for something on your ranch, a practice there. And with IGM, you all got that started, and you all already had these fences in place, these smaller paddocks. And when we say smaller, you mentioned earlier, we're still talking large, 70 to 1,100 acres. So we're still talking large paddocks. Did that work in conjunction with those paddocks or pastures you have, or was that any type of problem with that?
So in theory, IMG can be used in theory, you would get all the interior fences, and they would have this entire 8,000 acres to be able to migrate around, choose the grasses that they needed. Thank goodness like I mentioned, we have all the horses, and we had several horse bands that we have to keep fenced separate. Couple different stud pastures, things like that. And so we couldn't pull all the interior fences. And I'm really glad that we didn't, because along this journey, after learning about IMG, I went to a seminar that was done by Ian Mitchell-Ennis. And he was very much so talking about the same type of grazing, only he was using herders to get the same effect that I was getting with our instinctive migratory grazing. And what really clicked right there, after listening to him and conversing with him a little bit, was that we needed these fences, because I needed to confine them to a specific area to say, okay, you guys are going to migrate this 70 acres, and it might only take you a day to migrate it, but I need you to get everything that you're going to get out of here. And then I'll open the gate and you'll move on to the next pasture and you'll do the same thing. Now, we're not taking it to the ground. We're only taking the top third, because when you reboot those cows and you don't force them to take everything, they really only want one bite off of a plant. And so they're just taking that top third and then they're moving on. And so what I had really gained from Ian was a grazing plan. And so that's what I call planned migratory grazing. And it's strictly built on ratios of pasture size and the amount of rest that you want each pasture to get. And so our entire grazing plan is set up on a formula. And last weekend, I think, is when I finally got ours done. We'd been kind of winging it, to be honest with you, this year, because we're we're a little bit behind. Well, we know that, it's time to come out of this pasture. And so I finally sat down, got all the math done, did all the figuring on it, and got our grazing plan from now until December 31st all laid out. And so our infrastructure that was already in place really played a key role in that, and knowing what our pasture sizes were, and how long we wanted those pastures to rest. So now we only summer graze with our main cow herd, about 3,000, maybe 3,500 acres. And then our yearlings will graze another 3,000, maybe 2,500 acres. And so then that leaves, that's like 5,500 total. So there's another 2,500 acres that are in insurance pastures that are in rest for a full grazing season. And sometimes that adjusts. Sometimes we have to pull things out of insurance. And sometimes if the grass is growing and we get the perfect ideal rains and everything, sometimes we shorten up those acres that we're on so that maybe our main cow herd is only grazing 2,000 to 2,500 acres for the entire summer, and everything else is in insurance or rest. So it's been quite a journey with the instinctive migratory grazing and then combining it with our planned migratory grazing.
Oh,
It's been incredible watching. Like, one thing that we did one year was we started the cattle over on the far east end of our place. We're contiguous, so that helps. And as they would graze a pasture, and the math on our plan said they should be coming out, like about a day before, we'd go open the gate. And sure enough, we'd go back the next day that they were like actually be the day after. So there was a day skip in there. So the day after, what they should have been coming out of that pasture, and they were out and grazing the next pasture. So we just kept doing that, and we grazed them. We migrated them all the way through, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pastures. They migrated with us just opening the gate the day before, the night before they were supposed to come out of there, type deal. And so what that allows us to do is we now graze some pastures 5 and 6 times in a growing season, because we've only taken the top third. Then sometimes it takes 15 to 20 days to recover. Sometimes it takes 45 days to recover, just kind of depending.
oh yeah.
But when we're really moving fast through them, that helps us because we can come back around and graze again, that same pasture. That in itself has been an eye-opener because they don't always graze the same plants each time through. So when they come through in May, they're going to be grazing the cheat grasses and the early cool seasons grasses. When you come back through in June, those grasses are already kind of mature and headed out, and they've picked up a different grass that they're going after, or forb or whatever. And it didn't matter that our grazing plan still held for whatever species of grass that they were after, because we have such great diversity in our pastures.
With them going through, just a little bit, I want to talk more about your forages and your pastures in just a moment. But help me see, when you got this herding instinct rebooted in your cow herd, am I looking out there and I would think they were surrounded by electric fences and kept in a small area? They're grazing that close together as they move through a pasture?
At times, yes. Depending on which pastures they were in. If we have them down on the sub-irrigated meadows, I've actually got video clips and pictures of them being tight, like they were fenced into an area. And then when you realize that they have access to 900 acres and they're just in this little wad, just walking along, migrating along, grazing, it's huge when you finally get to see that. Now, when we get up in the uplands, they're not going to be that tight, but you will see them. We could have 200 to 300 head, like 200 head of pairs in roughly 5 acres as they migrate along.
Yeah.
But we've also seen them as tight as 100 foot by 200 foot, whatever, that's like 3/10 of an acre or something.
Now, with your cow herd, you all went through that process and got the IMG going. Have you all brought in any new cows into the herd other than what you've raised?
We have. We actually, so in that era since 2017, I bought some cows to bring in, and that was an adventure getting them to hook onto our cows. They settled in a lot faster than maybe previous cows have because of the way we handled, but you could sure see that some of those cows had maybe been mishandled, as they would run and search out trees to hide under or brush up. And, it took a few times of handling them for them to figure out, hey, it's okay to be with the herd. You don't have to run away and go isolate yourself. Like, the herd's where you want to be. And then we've also brought in 2 separate groups of share cattle as we keep building our numbers, leveraging somebody else's cattle, basically. But, it's always interesting watching those cattle come in, and they'll finally assimilate. Some cattle take a little longer than others, just depending on their background. We've not found, we actually used the stockmanship techniques. We were day working quite a bit up until about 2020. And so for 3 years there, we were day working pretty strong. And so we hadn't found a herd of cattle yet that wouldn't respond positively to the stockmanship of the IMG stuff. And we're talking range cattle that were flighty, 10,000 acre pasture. And as soon as they saw you 2 miles away, they were gone. And pretty soon they'd see us 2 miles away, and they're coming towards us because we're drawing them to us, and instead of pushing them away from us. It was pretty crazy to watch.
And how long did that process take on your all's initial herd to get that rebooted? And when I say that, I know y'all did a few months, then Bob came out there. When Bob left, was your herd, would you consider them IMG at that point?
I would consider them pretty strongly rebooted. Yeah, it takes 5 consistent days.
Okay.
Of no screw ups. I mean, as soon as you revert back to old habits and everything else, it blows them apart. And so then you spend another day or two essentially rebooting, but it doesn't take as long. But yeah, Bob and I both tell you 5 days, 5 consistent days, that reboots is there as long as you continue with that same program then.
With your 5 days, so you're saying someone goes out to your course, and we're going to talk about this later. They come home, 5 days they can go through this. Are they going to spend those 5 days out with the cows the whole time, or is it a little while each day?
It's really, now, like, if you come to our school, it's 5 intense days out with the cattle, mostly because we've got so many people that we need to get hands-on cattle, so everybody needs opportunity or whatnot. Really, the 5 days are, you have the techniques down, you know what you're doing, you know how to read everything that's going on. You go home and you go out, you move your cows, you pick them up in the morning and take them to water and put them on a grazing path. That's day 1. You go out the next day. What you'll see is your cattle on day 1, they will be scattered all over the pasture. And day 1, you'll pick them up, you'll move them to water using the stockmanship techniques. You'll take them off water and put them on a grazing path, and then let them be. And day 2, you'll go out and you're like, nothing's changed. And so you'll pick them up again and you'll take them to water, and then you'll put them on a grazing path and you'll ride away. So, I mean, we're talking 2 to 3 hours, maybe, depending on your pasture size and how much area you're having to cover. And by day 3, you'll kind of see pods of cattle around. And so, you'll have a small group here and a small group over there. And so now you're gathering pods of cattle to water instead of all these individuals. And you'll bring them into water and you'll take them off and put them on a grazing path. And then by day 4, you'll see about 3 distinct herds of cattle. And then by day 5, you should be down to 2, and usually you'll be down to 1 distinct group of cattle. It really does happen that fast if you've got all of the pieces in place with your stockmanship.
Oh, yes. And do you have to revisit that from time to time, or it's like a computer, it's rebooted, so it's good to go?
So truly, once you convert, you don't ever want to go back, because every time now, if we change pastures, we use those techniques. So essentially, we are revisiting it.
Yeah.
If we went back to driving them, it would blow them apart and they would be stressed, and then they would never come together and graze in the pasture. So we have to go back to the IMG stockmanship techniques. Every time we move our cows, we take them to fresh pasture, we put them on a grazing path, and then they're good to go.
Oh, very good. With the stockman techniques, Are those beneficial for you even if you're not working on horseback, or is it just mainly if you're working from horseback?
We're really glad that we learned them a horse, because now we understand the communication that's going on, because really it's communication between your horse and the cattle. And that's what's creating that draw and then getting the cattle to do what they do, and reducing the stress on them. We have been able to progress those same techniques into the corral on foot, but we have to
Oh, yes.
mimic what our horse does. And so, once you understand what the communication between the animals, then you can start to make that communication yourself. And now we do have a four-wheeler. We bought a four-wheeler here a couple of years ago, and we hadn't had one on the place forever. I mean, I think my husband had one when he was in high school, but so we bought a four-wheeler, and we've played around with that a little bit too. And it's a whole different type of communication. Your horse has lateral movement, which is huge in that. A four-wheeler does not have lateral movement. A
Oh,
four-wheeler
yeah.
has headlights that look like prey eyes. Horses don't have. Shaping up my horse's body, because I rely a lot on flex of my horse, and to send the communication and whatnot is based on the head posture and the body posture of my horse. And a four-wheeler is all straight lines. So
Oh,
it
right.
can be done, but it's not as effective. It just, I don't know. I think if you learn the techniques of horseback, you can figure out how to make a four-wheeler work, but you still won't have the same control that you have with a horse.
Yeah. So the horse is kind of the basic level, and I hate to use the word basic, but you really got to get the handle on that before you try and do some of the other more advanced,
Yeah,
as you
I
figure
would
that
definitely
out and
agree with
understand
that.
it. Yeah. When you think about operations that would benefit from an IMG grazing, who is that?
I would say it's large acres, arid environment. And that's the people that have not been able to get rotational grazing to work for them. When you're in a large acre arid environment, you're so brittle, you can't afford to take everything off. You can't afford to screw up one of those paddocks, because then you're 2 to 3 years before it ever recovers. And depending on how much
Oh,
of
yeah.
that, you could lose half your ranch for 2 to 3 years. And so really the IMG and the PMG, it fits those large acres. And like, we're not big. We're 8,000. And there's certainly a lot other places that are a lot more acres than we are and a lot more arid than we are. They're talking 80 to
Oh, yeah.
120 acres to a cow. And they're utilizing it in some of those areas.
Yeah. Is there's a couple more questions I have on your herd and on forages. Well, let's go ahead and ask about the forages. I'll come back to your herds and your pastures in just a moment. With your forages, in doing this, have you noticed any change in your forage species or forage quality? Has it been negative, positive?
Through the data that I've collected over the years, we've seen a really nice shift from annual plants, our cheatgrass, to perennial plants, our western wheat. And it's been for the positive. Like, we don't
Oh,
have a
yes.
cheatgrass problem. Cheatgrass is one of those things that we graze early on in March and April. And so that keeps it pretty well knocked back, so that then our favorable cool season grasses aren't competing with it the entire cool season long, to the point that our cheatgrass is maybe a little endangered. And I'm not sure what we're going to use as an early March,
Oh,
April feed if
yes.
we keep on this trend. But so that is a major shift that we've seen. And I've got that data collected somewhere. I just didn't drag it out, but I'm not even going to quote any numbers, but it's been a
Oh, yeah.
huge shift for the positive. Like I said, we're sagebrush, we're western wheat, we're buffalo grass, threadleaf sedge, green needle grass, needle and thread. Trying to think, June grass, cheatgrass. It's brome grasses down on the meadow. I don't know. At one point, I think there was like 47 different species of plants, forbs, grasses available to graze that we had monitored and found on our place. So, I mean, there's a huge variety.
I was about to say I've never been to Wyoming, and then I was like, wait, I have. I went to a Cheyenne rodeo once.
Barely into the tip of Wyoming.
Barely, yes. I think you've mentioned a few times to this. You run your cow herd as one herd, and you run yearlings as a second herd?
We do. That allows it. So where we run our cow herd at, we found that we can summer our cow herd and rotational graze them with the IMG, and they actually will leave enough stockpile forage that we can bring winter graze, custom graze cattle in and graze all of that we just spent the summer on. In the meantime, our yearlings are grazing another section of the ranch, a couple thousand acres or whatever, and they're keeping that part of it vegetative. So when they leave, our cow herd can actually migrate over and they will winter on what the yearlings were able to keep vegetative and stockpile at a little bit lesser density. You know, their yearlings are lighter and there's not as many of them. And so that's what we rely on then for our winter stockpile grazing is what the yearlings can generate in regrowth and stockpile. And then, like I said, we actually found a kind of a niche market where we custom graze winter grazing cattle on everything that we had already summer grazed. And people, to begin with, people are like, I don't want your old grass. And now I've got guys calling going, hey, can we get some winter grass?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When do those yearling calves come, if you've got your heifers, when do they come back to the main herd? Or when are they assimilated into that main herd?
So we do things a lot different around here. We don't wean. So we June calve.
Okay.
We will wean the following April.
Oh, okay. 11 months old.
So they run on the cow all winter, grazing out with the cow all winter. At that point, when we wean, we will cut the bull calves. And so then the heifers and those Ben steers will get thrown together into the yearlings bunch. So because they're basically fresh weaned calves. They will run together until about the middle of August. And then we'll pull the heifers out of that bunch and throw them back in the cow herd right prior to throwing bulls in about the 17th, 18th of August.
Yeah.
So the steers will finish out in a group of their own, and they'll leave usually mid-October is when we sow those steers.
So the heifers are back in the herd and they're breeding with your main herd. You're not doing anything special to get those heifers bred the first time.
Right. Yeah. They just run like the cows do, you know, and sometimes they don't. I shouldn't say sometimes they don't, but like as rough as they're ran, they don't always mature out as fast. They're kind of slow growth cattle, which grass cattle are anyways. And so it's kind of interesting watching that all unfold as we kick them back into the main herd and watch them breed. You know, sometimes that heifer breed up isn't the greatest. And we've actually found that if we will just keep the top end of those that were open, then we can run them another year. It doesn't cost us anything to run them. Like it actually benefits us to have those numbers. And then let them grow out and mature. Then they'll stay in the cow herd for quite a while.
Yeah. So you're calving some at 24 months, but there's some you'll keep the top end that didn't breed at that point, and they can calve at 3 years and stay in.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's an interesting discussion. We had GP Angus on here, and we were talking about them, and they were going to try some 3-year-olds versus 2 because they're doing some slow growing or growing only on grass. And I know for us here, sometimes we have trouble getting those 15-month-old heifers big enough to breed on time, and that breed up is not as high as we'd like.
Right. And I don't know that it's so much for us a matter of size, because we've had some really little heifers breed up. You know, they're breeding at 6.5, and I mean, they're maturing at 1,000 pounds when they're a 5-year-old cow, you know, that's pretty little when you're breeding up there, but they'll breed up then. It's just, I don't know, it's just a matter of, I'm not sure, maturity or something.
I don't know. We had 1 year out of one set of one bull we had used, we had a fair number. We had a young bull with them. We didn't think they would breed, and we calved out a fair number of heifers at 21 months. And we're like, we're having trouble getting this group to breed at 15 to 16 months, and here we've got this group that's calving at 21. So we haven't necessarily been trying to repeat that, but we've been trying to get better on that, using some of those genetics and stuff, because we're like, why did that work then and not these other times? It's one of those things when you think you know best, you don't. Now, with your forages, we talked about the forages and forage changes. One thing you mentioned throughout this, which I really love the term, is insurance pastures. So let's talk a little bit about your insurance pastures. Why do you call them that? And how much of your ranch is the insurance pastures?
So insurance pastures were a new thing that we picked up from our conversation with Ian, because I guess to begin with, when we really wanted to step forward and try to up the production on our ranch, we had to know in our own minds that we weren't shooting ourselves in the foot. Like, what if this fails miserably and I graze this half of the ranch and, oh my goodness, it does not recover? Like, what are we going to do? And so the first idea came about when, how do you effectively double your stocking rate, or know that you can double your stocking rate? Well, you cut your ranch in half and you take your same cattle and you stock
that sounds
only
so
half
simple
your
when
ranch.
Sorry, Ricky, you cut your ranch in half. That sounds so simple, but that's not the immediate, at first you're like, well, what do I do? But it's just so simple.
Yes. It was like a light bulb moment, huge,
Right.
So then what's the other half of your ranch become? It becomes the insurance for if you screwed up so bad on this half of the ranch, you still have half of it available. If you have to destock, great, destock, but you still have grass to go to, or a pasture that's going to grow again next year, depending on if you damaged it that bad. And so that's where the insurance thing came from. Well, then we also knew that we had two separate things that we needed to keep separate. And so we had our main cow herd and we had our yearlings. And so we had to designate some grass to both places. So, there are some times when we are literally grazing both of those herds of cattle on half the ranch, and the other half is literally resting. Now, if we should happen to get a hailstorm or a fire come through in the middle of a grazing season, guess what? We're pulling pastures out of insurance, like, cattle, you're going here. This one's no longer available. So it opened up a lot of opportunities for us to do some different things. The other thing with it, like last year, July 2nd was the last measurable rain or precipitation we got until November. All of that pastures that we had planned in April, saying, hey, these are all going to be insurance pastures, we weren't afraid of not getting any more moisture or the fact that it hadn't rained, because we knew we were keeping these as vegetative as we could. And we had this stockpile already set aside. So now, we're going to kick into an insurance pasture to let these have, 60 days rest. And maybe it'll rain in that amount of time so we can get them to regenerate. And so that's really how we use them. And they truly are just that. They're insurance against poorly placed bets.
Oh, yeah. And you're holding off of grazing them during the growing season. Is that the only time you're holding off of them, or do you let them rest even longer?
That's usually the only time we hold off of them. And and they might only be insurance for a part of the grazing season.
Oh, yeah.
We may plan on using them, and then in June, we're like, oh my goodness, we cannot stay ahead of this grass growth. And so then we start kicking more pastures after we maybe grazed them once, kicking them to insurance and tightening up the area that we're grazing to try to keep it vegetative and high quality for as long as we can. Or the other side is when you pull them out of insurance. So ideally, we try to keep them in there for a full grazing season, but it might be shorter or longer. And then the part is we want to come, and that's why we bring in winter cattle, is we need cattle in here to clean off all that stockpile and trample it down and get it broken down and start building the soil. Then, we're armoring it with all that forage that was still standing, but we're also able to harvest so much of it as well and capitalize on that extra stream of income with those custom grazed cattle without damaging our pastures.
I don't know if I've heard the term insurance pastures before. I'm apt to. I don't know if Ian uses it. I've heard him speak, but I don't know. When you said it today, I'm like, I love that name. It's a nice, easily identifiable term for you're setting that pasture aside. It's in case we need it. In fact, when I get off here, I got to talk to Dad. We weren't going to bale any hay, but we've got lots of grass, so we're thinking about baling a little bit of hay. But we're going to start using that term, insurance pastures, and those that we stay off of, just in case we need them. I love that terminology. So let's transition just a little bit, Riki, and let's talk about your school coming up. You have a school coming up. I should know. I don't have it up on my screen, but
I believe it's July 7th through the 11th.
There we go. So tell us about your school. Tell us what. Well, first, just tell us about your school that's coming up.
Yeah, it's July 7th through the 11th. And what Justin and I have gone to doing, I think we started this in 2020, after we wrapped our minds around what Bob had taught us and everything, and we saw the powerful effect of it. When you know what, we'll branch out and offer it, because we have the opportunity to bring people here and show them what a rebooted herd looks like, what our grasses are looking like. When you can look across the fence and see a fence line difference, then you kind of start to see, oh my goodness, things are different on this place. Why are they different? And so we give people then the hands-on teaching of all the stockmanship techniques that are required in rebooting the cow herd. We go through the math of our planned migratory grazing system so that people understand how it ties into the IMG and how this whole system, it really is holistic, how it all ties together to form what we have created here and been able to do in shrinking our animal units per acre. So it's a week long. It's intense. When the class is full, then we're looking at 10 to 12 hour days in the saddle just to make sure everybody gets hands-on time. The fewer class people that I have in attendance, 3 is the minimum that I can have, and 5 to 6 is optimal, because then we're, 8 hours a day in the saddle. Everybody's got hands-on. Everybody's been able to practice the techniques and see how the herd is affected and get them to move to you. We actually, I have some neighbors that are allowing me to utilize their cattle that are not rebooted.
Oh, nice.
They will attend the school also to learn these techniques. And so it's kind of like my little bribe. They're like, hey, I'll teach you, but I got to use your cattle that don't know anything about this. And so, we work on fresh cattle. We work on our cattle, our yearlings, our pairs, because every animal class responds differently, and there's different cues and signals and things that you have to pay attention depending on the class of the animal, being yearlings, being cow-calf pairs that are baby versus cow-calf pairs that are 3 to 4 months old versus dry cows. There's a whole bunch of different nuances there. So we try to get a variety of cattle that you're handling and things like that. And we spend a week, not necessarily, my cattle are rebooted, so we don't even have to spend the week on my cattle. That's why my neighbors are really chomping at the bit for this is, they get their cattle rebooted in that week.
Oh, yeah. So what does someone who's interested in coming, what do they need to do?
They need to have a horse, and they need to have the ability to ride and get their horse to do some basic horsemanship maneuvers, and then show up and be ready to camp out on the prairie and just enjoy Wyoming.
So I'm understanding correctly, they're bringing their horse out there and going through the course.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, they'd show up with their horse and then we'd go play cowboy on the range.
Oh, yes.
It's, I try to
And
set it up because I know when we were learning and trying to get to seminars and everything, it seemed like, the whatever venue was hosting, they always wanted their cut of what people were bringing in. And so, they provided your meals, but the meals were going to cost you $50 a day. And I'm like, I
oh,
could eat
yeah.
for a lot less than $50 a day,
Right.
and here's your hotel room, but it's 180
Mhm.
bucks. And I'm like, the people that are truly need this, that isn't where their focus is. And so I really try to do it as bare bones as I can. And I'll be upfront with you. I'm like, you know what? You're packing your own lunch. So bring a cooler. I'll supply ice. You're going to bring your own lunch. You're going to cook your own meals at night over a campfire or a grill or whatever you want. You're going to fix your own breakfast if you eat breakfast in the morning. If you don't, great. And then, like you want to sleep in your horse trailer, you can, or you have a tent or whatever, or Lesk is 20 miles away down a gravel county road. So,
Oh, yeah.
if you want to go stay in a motel or hotel, I shouldn't say motel. If you need a bed and you're just not up for camping, the horses can stay penned out here at the ranch. And then there are motels in Lusk. There are restaurants available, so there is that also. But really the aspect, sometimes I think the fun of it is when you actually do get to come camp on the range and just be a part of the ranch.
I'm not even sure that's not a tourist opportunity right there, just to let them for a week cowboy with you and camp out on the range.
Right? I'm probably missing something there in agritourism.
Right, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that sounds fun for a couple days, then I'd have to recoup because I'm pretty sure I can't sleep on the ground that long, but,
And, it's amazing. I never gave it a thought when we first started this. We were day working a lot, and 10, 12 hours in the saddle was no big deal for us, and then
Oh, yeah.
people are like, "Yeah, I ride all the time." And then they'd show up and man, by day 3, you're really starting to feel it. And I feel it now that I've gone back to teaching. I'm like, "Ooh, this is a little rough this many hours in the saddle." So yeah, you want a taste of true cowboy life.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it wouldn't take too long. Is there anything else you'd like to share about your school coming up or about your operation before we move to the famous 4?
And I think we've covered a lot of it. I just, you know, if you're got brittle arid country and you're trying to find that way to get over the hump on this deal, it really is worth looking into and investigating a little bit further. And if you're a horse oriented outfit, I mean, it's a great fit. You're not babysitting your cows. You reboot them and you ride away, and they do their own thing for however long they're supposed to be in that pasture. So that's, I just try to get them people as much information as I can through our school, not only with the IMG stuff, but with the planned migratory grazing as well. And just all the pieces that I have gathered up over the last
Oh,
17
yeah.
years now. I try to teach. I just try to convey to people and pass on my knowledge. And that's really what I'm after, is just passing the knowledge on.
Yeah. I think it's a wonderful thing. I hope you have lots of people and y'all have to spend too long in the saddle each day. Moving to our famous 4 questions. Today's famous 4 questions are sponsored by Grazing Grass Insiders. Our Grazing Grass Insiders have greater access to behind the scenes on the podcast, as well as some other benefits, and they support this podcast, making sure it goes further. And to be honest, the behind the scenes and access to other things we're working on here has not been very good in the past. I have a couple of things in the works, and hopefully those will be out soon, and our insiders will reap the benefits from that first. But insiders, I appreciate you supporting the podcast and helping us keep this going. If you'd like to be an insider, you can go over to grazinggrass.com and click on Insiders. It has it there, and you can join and help us get these episodes out each week. I appreciate each and every one of our insiders. Thank you. Same 4 questions we ask of all of our guests. Our first question: What's your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
Well,
And I know you're starting to say Bob Kinford. He's got a lot of stories, but let's go beyond Bob.
yeah, no, I'll definitely probably have to go beyond Bob. So it's been a while since I've read. I'm trying to think. Actually, we started on a lot of Jim Garish's stuff, and
Oh,
there were a
yes.
lot of key pieces to that. I like listening to Ian Mitchell Innes and his ideas.
Oh,
And
yes.
then Walt Davis had a lot of key
Oh,
pieces of information there too. I really I
yes.
enjoyed reading his books and the little tidbits of knowledge that he puts out there too. Trying to think who did Knowledge Rich Ranching. That one was a
Alan Nation.
yes. That
Yeah.
one was it was early on in 08, 09 probably when I read it, and it kind of started snapping some pieces into place for us too, or at least verifying that we were on a path of some sort, that somebody had traveled with success.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All those people you mentioned are great resources. On Ian Mitchell Enos, do you know does he have any video? I know he's got a few videos online. Is there anything online that you really point to with his stuff, or is it more in person?
Since more in person, I did run across, and I haven't had a chance to fully watch it, but somebody just recently did an interview with him. I'm trying to think who that was because I found it on YouTube and I started listening to it, and Justin and we were getting ready or something to go somewhere, and I just kicked it on, and they just gotten to the point of talking about some of the stuff that was really mind blowing to us at the time, and
Oh,
sent us
yes.
down a road. And I'm like, "That's the stuff." And he's like, "Yeah, it is." And then we had to go and lost service, and so I haven't
Oh,
got back to it.
yes.
But I do know that there is that video out there that had, and like I say, for the life of me, I can't think of the name of it.
I'll have to look and see if I can find it. Our second question, what's your favorite tool for the ranch?
My horse.
I I thought it might be your horse. How many horses do you have that you ride regularly?
Let's see. I have two. Justin has two. Royal has one, and then we got a bunch of colts kind of coming up that kind of shift in and out of our
Oh,
saddle
yeah.
string, but we each have two main go-to horses.
Two regulars. Yeah. Right. During your school, will you use those interchangeably, or in your mind, are those horses interchangeable with your herding, with your stockmanship?
They really are. We found early on that even like we can take a very green colt, a colt with not much experience and not very much as far as a handle on them, and still be able to shape them up and get the response we need from our cattle.
Oh,
So,
yes.
it's not uncommon for us then to go ahead and ride a green horse at our school. Like day one, I'll probably be on a solid horse, and so I can show the techniques and I can make sure they're all right. But then from that point forward, I may jump onto a green one and be like, "Well, here we go. Now we're on a young horse. You can see how they handle, and
Oh, yeah.
this is what it's going to be like for you when you go home and your horse, is fresh or new, or you step on a different horse that hasn't been to 5 days of the school and different
Right.
things like
Which
that."
which I think is really beneficial for people learning to see, hey, your horse doesn't have to be a veteran with this to be able to do this.
Right. The veteran
Yeah.
horses certainly are fun, and they allow you to get a little bit lazy because the
Yeah.
horse, it doesn't take long and the horse figures it out. Like I have one little mare, and you'll be riding along and you'll be kind of watching up there, and she's watching behind her. She's watching everywhere where you might be focused on one thing. And all of a sudden, if you're not paying attention, she'll just stop and reverse, and like she'll just turn, and then you'll look, you're like, "Oh yeah, the cow stopped." And she's already pulling cows back past her on her own. I'm like,
Oh,
"Oh,
yeah.
good catch."
Yeah. Glad you're here.
But they sure
Yeah.
will. I am here. You got this.
Right. I should have just sent you out here to do it. Yeah. Our third question, what would you tell someone just getting started?
Learn. learn as much as you can and learn from as many people as you can, because even if you only took one thing away from every individual you ever encountered, your toolbox is overflowing. Lifelong learning is huge. And even, we talked earlier in the episode about being humbled by Mother Nature, but yet those lessons we're still learning, because sometimes when you're on the forefront of things and, this technique, yeah, it's been proven, but it's still pretty experimental. Like, that's the phase that I feel like we're in. Like, we're experimenting with this. How far can we push this? What can we do? So there's nobody out there laying the path for us, but yet we're still
Right.
learning as we go.
Yeah. Excellent advice there. Yeah. If and I think, and I apply it to myself, if I can take one thing from every episode that I've done on the podcast, I ought to be much better, and I am. I guess I'm just a little slow. I'll work on that. Our last question of our famous four: how can others find out more about you and the course?
Bob Kinford does have a migratory grazing website. There's a lot of information there. It's kind of abstract because it's such an abstract topic. Like, there's not going to be a lot of information told to you on how to do it, but there is some information out there on what it is. I don't have a website personally. I kind of utilize Facebook a little bit. There is a little bit out there on YouTube. If you searched up my name, Riki Kremers, there's some different stockmanship things that we've done, some drone videos that we've done of our herd. If that interests you in what our herd is doing and those little clips that I've put out, then, feel free to reach out to me. Facebook message me. Just figure out how to get a hold of me, I guess. It's not that hard.
Yeah, Facebook works for so many people, and then obviously they could email you as well.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And that's the last of the famous four, but we got one more question to wrap up. Do you have a question for me?
Do I have a question for you? Do you intend to keep doing these podcasts?
I I plan on not stopping because they are so beneficial for me. This IMG, I'm not going to do it here. My environment's different. We don't use horses. It's not something I think would benefit me here. But did I gain something from the conversation? I did, besides just the getting to network with someone and learning about your operation. And I mentioned this insurance pastures. I love that term. I love the idea of it. I'm going to run with that. So just picking up something from each episode, and I mentioned this an episode or two ago, that, when you go to conferences, you come back, you're kind of energized. People that's going to go to your school, they're going to get home, they're going to be excited. Well, we don't all have the opportunity to go to conferences every time we need a shot of motivation. But these podcasts can be that. And me having these opportunities to talk to people that's in the trenches doing it, they just energize me and motivate me to do a better job.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear that, because you are so right. Like, just use the insurance pasture idea there, that just those little tidbits sometimes are the catalyst that somebody needs on getting them over that hump and down the next path.
I so agree. Just to continue on that, if we look at someone where they are and we think, how do we get there? That's too big a leap. If yourself in 2002 or 2007 looked at where you are right now, you might say, we'll never get there. But by taking these little steps, these little tidbits from everyone, you're going to eventually get there. But you got to be careful not to think, oh, I got to make that huge leap today, because that's daunting and will cause us to give up too soon.
That's one thing that we've done is, and I provide it to my students when they come to the school, is a book that we've put together, not only on the stockmanship techniques and the grazing plans and everything, but it also outlines our journey, and that you see that we went from 2 pounds a head a day of cake down to a half a pound a day, and just those little incremental changes that we made over time. And finally, it got to the point where we could totally change directions in a positive way, the way that we wanted to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's excellent. Riki, really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us.
It's been great. I thank you for the opportunity, Cal.
This is our second episode we've had about instinctive migratory grazing. Bob Kinford was on here, and I should have looked up that episode number. I'm thinking in the 90s. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But really excited to have Riki on to share about their operation. You know, when I first hear about it, I'm like, does this really work? Is it a valid program? But based upon talking to Riki and talking to Bob and seeing the numbers that Riki shared with us, as well as she sent me another file with more information, it does look like it works. She has greatly improved her stocking rate, how many or carrying capacity. So if you are running animals and you use horses with them, and you are a bigger area thinking, I don't know about this electric fence, this may be the thing you're looking for. So I encourage you to check out her school, look into more information at Bob's website. I think it's all very interesting. Now, my biggest takeaway, though, is the insurance pastures, and I'm sure you knew that from my conversation with Riki. I love that idea. I love the terminology, insurance pasture. In fact, I told Riki at the end of the conversation, I'm going to start using it. And I have. Talking to my dad, we've got some pastures that we've identified as insurance pastures. We're not going to touch them unless we have to. And if we don't touch them, then we're going to have old growth there that we can decide what to do later on. But the last few falls have been really dry. We fed way too much hay last fall. So hopefully these insurance pastures will help in that way. I'm curious what you think about insurance pastures. Are you doing that? Thank you for listening to this episode of the Grazing Grass Podcast, where we bring you stories and insights into grass-based livestock production. If you're new here, we've got something just for you. Our new listener resource guide is packed with everything you need to get started on your listening journey with the Grazing Grass Podcast. Gives you more information about the podcast, about myself, and next steps. You can grab your free copy at grazinggrass.com/guide. Don't miss out. And hey, do you have a grazing story to share? We're always looking for passionate producers to feature on the show. Whether you're just starting out or have years of experience, your story matters. Head over to grazinggrass.com/guest to learn more and apply to be a guest. We'd love to share your journey with our growing community of grazers. Until next time, keep on grazing grass.